Hi, I'm Frieda Vizel, and today I'm excited to talk to Naomi Seidman about a very special part of Jewish Williamsburg story. Our conversation will be related to the Bais Yaakov school system, which has its American origins in Williamsburg. Naomi Seidman is the Chancellor Jackman Professor of the Arts in the Department for the Study of Religion and Center for Diaspora and Transnational Studies at the University of Toronto, and she's a 2016 Guggenheim Fellow. Her publications include Faithful Renderings, Jewish-Christian Difference and the Politics of Translation, The Marriage Plot, or How Jews Fell in Love with Love and with Literature, and Sarah Schenirer and the Bais Yaakov Movement, A Revolution in the Name of Tradition, which won a National Jewish Book Award in Women's Studies. Naomi is presently working on a study of Freud in Hebrew and Yiddish translation. Hello, Naomi.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited. We're going to do something very fun today for my YouTube channel. So Naomi and I sort of have this intersection of our areas of study, which is Naomi's done this beautiful book on the Bais Yaakov, the origin of Bais Yaakov, and Sarah Schenirer, the founder of the Bais Yaakov movement. And Bais Yaakov's American origins began in Williamsburg, which is my sort of turf, which I study, and we've worked together on the places in Williamsburg that started Bais Yaakov. So, do you want to add something to that? You want to tell us what we're going to do today?
Yeah, sure. So, it's been so great working with you, Frieda. And I think you sent me an email or something. You troll the, eBay or something, and you said buy these yearbooks. And eBay is full of Bais Yaakov yearbooks, and I bought a couple. And I have to say that they tend to be kind of boring and expensive, and sometimes full of mold. And they show up, and I stick them on my shelf and back of me. And I don't necessarily know what to do with them, but these weren't that expensive, and there were two of them, and I'm so glad that you told me to get them, because first of all, they're the oldest yearbooks I have.
What year range are the others?
1955.
1950, 1955?
Yes. So I don't know, I mean, there might well be older yearbooks, but this is like the yearbook in its infancy. And I think they're just really interesting, and thank you for getting me to finally open them up and look at them.
Do you have them physically there?
Yearbooks, it's like listening to someone else's dream. They're interesting if you know the people, but otherwise they're remarkably similar, and who cares really? They have the same jokes, the same photos, the same everything. But this, I think, is a little bit different and more interesting. I hope so, and I'm really, really glad that you got me to buy them. I think I got both of them for like $30. Am I remembering right?
I think so. It was, or 50 maybe. I think it's pretty well priced, considering it's what the Bais Yaakov started not too many years before 1950. So this is really some of the first years.
It's true, and it's sort of random whether things will be, people will just give them to me for free, or whether I'll, have to pay a lot of money for them. And it's also just like when you do research in the Orthodox world, this is what you have to do. You have to go to auction sites. You have to deal with, I don't know, weird people online that have pseudo businesses. And you don't know what you're going to get. And it's, because there's really no real professional archives. Where are you going to find, an archive of Bais Yaakov yearbooks or anything like that? So, and they're also the material objects. And for me, like to have a material object, as opposed to having yet another horrible microfiche that gives me a headache to look at, is special, and they always have interesting extra things that are in them or with them, or even though I have no idea where this yearbook came from, or whose grandmother died so that it showed up on eBay, and I don't think we'll ever know. So they still they're of mysterious provenance, but sometimes provide really interesting insights that aren't otherwise available in history books.
You've done some work on looking at class photos, right? which
Yeah.
similarly, a lot of people will say, oh, they're all the same. But if you know how to look at things.
I thought that about class photos too, and I found it slightly embarrassing that my website, let's plug my website, the BaisYaakovProject.com, which features Frieda among other people, that the website has so many class photos and that they're so conventional and they're so stylized. But actually I'm sorry about the garbage truck in front of my house.
Oh, it's
Wednesday
noisy?
morning, I should have remembered.
It's fine. We hear you fine.
Oh, okay, good. So somebody actually wrote a book about class photos that came out, and it just so happened to be, it was co-authored by Marion Hirsch and Leo Spitzer, who might be married to each other, who both were young children during the war and lived in refugee Jewish communities. So the photographs that they analyzed in their book were actually really similar to the Bais Yaakov photographs. Photographs of Jewish schools. And they basically laid out what the conventions are of the school photograph. And then you can look at it. First of all, the conventions themselves are interesting, right? Like every face has to show, which requires certain kinds of seating arrangements. And when you don't have that conventional seating arrangement, you still have to have every face showing. And that really distinguishes it from other kinds of sort of live group shots. And generally there's a teacher on one side, so you figure out who the biggest person is in the shot, and that's the teacher. And very often there's a little at the bottom, there might be a row of younger kids sitting cross-legged on the bottom, and the name of the school or the name of the class. But even within these particular conventions and norms, it's really interesting to see, things that stand out, somebody who isn't wearing the school uniform, or two girls that are leaning toward each other like they're friends, as opposed to just like, bowling pins equally distributed, and all sorts of other things. Once you start looking at class photos, they just open and open and open. So I'm really,
wow,
hoping to look at one together, or a few. I mean, there's some interesting ones in this yearbook.
Yeah. Maybe I'm sure among the things we see in the yearbook. So can you share your screen with me?
Sure. Well, I think you have to make me co-host, but if you did, then I can. Yes, I can. Oh, no, you have to make me co-host.
I did multiple participants can share simultaneously.
Here we go.
Who can share? Oh, here, perfect.
Uh-oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, that's not actually it. Oh no, look at all sorry, can you edit all this out? Where is it?
We only see an Adobe document.
Bais Yaakov project. Here it is, sorry.
Right now we're seeing a PDF.
Oh, you're not seeing this?
What is this?
My PowerPoint?
It says Megama Yearbook, Adobe Acrobat Reader, 32-bit.
No, so let me get out and try again. I'll stop share and I'll start again. Sorry about that, everybody. Do you see that now?
Yeah, very nice.
Okay,
you have to start this from beginning. Yeah.
I love this, what's it called? Template.
I have used it too. I have used it too. I like it.
But I forget what it's called. I don't know why I love it so much, but I love the font and the. Okay, so let me show you what I have.
What's Megama?
Megama. It means goal or aim. And maybe I could show you. Here are the two, just so you see it. Like this is Megama 1, our goal, which has a chain on it. And what's the chain for, Frieda?
Are we in class now? Is it the golden kite?
Of course it is, in case you think that we're looking at the chain of slavery or.
Yeah, I know. The visual's really bad.
Yeah, but this is. Here it's Hagama, and it's still called Hamigama. I'm sorry, it's not called Migama, it's called Hamigama, or Hamigama, I guess it would be in Ashkenazic Hebrew, the goal. And what is our goal? And it's translated into English as our goal. And they're both called, despite the fact that these yearbooks are 5 years apart, they're both called Hamigama. So, and the first one from 1950 has the Hebrew and English on one side. The second one is longer and more sophisticated, is Hamigama in English, and then our goal, oh no, it's the same on both sides. So that's the first thing to notice about it. Here are the two, I'll just run through it. So what really got me interested is these brochures I found, 2 brochures. One was all marked up with phone numbers, and the other one was in slightly better shape. But I think I like the one that's marked up with phone numbers.
Wow.
So there's an address here too.
Yeah, this is the big address of the building in Williamsburg that's now the hipster building.
The hipster building, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So this would really be great to put in your tour, right?
Yeah, I love it. It's a great picture. It says on the side, Bais Yaakov, Teacher Seminary of Brooklyn.
It says Bais Yaakov. So first of all, that it says Bais Yaakov. I'll just point out that Bais Yaakov is a kind of older name for Bais Yaakov in America. So Bais Yaakov Americanized its name as Bais Yaakov in the early years. So it's very interesting to see when you go from Bais Yaakov to Bais Yaakov and where it's still Bais Yaakov, etc. So that's the first thing to notice. The second thing, why don't you tell us a little bit about that building?
Well, yeah, that building is the big building into which the Bais Yaakov moved in. It was formerly the Long Island Business College, I believe, something like it. It was originally a college that was then bought up by the Bais Yaakov. And we've looked at the story of this building. This is where Bais Yaakov really took off and became a very important institution. And from there, it branched into Borough Park and Crown Heights and Coney Island. And eventually it became this huge girls' school institution, right, in America. But it closed, this particular building closed in Williamsburg and ended up becoming an artist's gorgeous apartment complex, refashioned. And the other day I went into the building. I don't have access into the apartments, but it's like you can see where everything was, that they've sectioned it off into apartments when you walk around the hallways. And it has good views of I think you can maybe see the bridge, I don't remember, from the top floor hallway, but I guess this is the growth as well as the end of Bais Yaakov in Williamsburg, because Williamsburg became too Hasidish for Bais Yaakov.
Yeah, so thank you for that little capsule history of Bais Yaakov. So this is a moment in Bais Yaakov that is over, but it doesn't mean Bais Yaakov is over. It just flourished in the yeshivish community, and the yeshivish community doesn't live in Williamsburg. They live in Borough Park and
Even the Hasidish community in Borough Park.
There's also, right. Actually, Borough Park was yeshivish and now it's increasingly Hasidish. So, these neighborhoods are shifting in various ways that affect the history of Bais Yaakov. So I don't know, there's so much to say about this brochure. I'm looking at the building. They somehow wrote in the image of the photo, you could see it says on the side of the building, Bais Yaakov Seminary, but I don't think it actually said that on the building, right?
I would imagine not.
So a couple of things. So just opening the brochure and looking at it, it gives you a kind of capsule history of Bais Yaakov. It gives the Bais Yaakov Teacher Seminary was organized in 1938, so 12 years before. That's not on your screen. And then there are the aims. What I have on the screen in front of you is, let's see, what do I have here? I don't know, this brochure has 8 sides, so there's so much of it. So Bais Yaakov l'chu
Wow.
v'neilcha b'or Hashem. That's interesting, right? That's the slogan of one of the slogans of Bais Yaakov that's remained intact from the Polish era and through America and until today. This is a really interesting and important piece of history, which is that the building housed both a modern dormitory and restaurant, which is an odd name for what I would call a dining hall. So I don't know if that meant it was open to the public. I doubt it. And why it's called restaurant remains a mystery. Also, what was served at the restaurant, but maybe that's asking too much.
No, they don't say what was served.
And they're maintained in our building for the foreign students, as well as for the girls who come from all corners of the United States, from as far as Phoenix, Arizona, Los Angeles, California, Seattle, Washington, and etc. So that's interesting. And then exclusive of our refugee students, and this whole brochure really focuses on refugee students who originate from most of the various sections of the Central, Western, and Eastern European countries. The following countries are also well represented at our school. Okay, Canada, but Mexico, Brazil, Uruguay, Venezuela, Ecuador, India, China, Syria. What the heck?
Wow.
And there's a picture of the dormitory, which is, looks interestingly sparse, but the beds are really close together, but the beds seem nice and wide. And there are 2 girls not in their pajamas, I'll have you note. It looks like Bais Yaakov l'chu v'neilcha is also written on the dormitory wall. And then at the bottom, studious moments in the library. A library, not to be taken for granted that there was a library, but there was also a library in the Krakow seminary. Did your Bais Yaakov, oh, you didn't go to Bais Yaakov, did Bais Yaakov have a library? It did.
No, not at all.
No. So this is, and then on the next slide, special class for foreign students.
Wow. What's that? Is that a Rebbe on the wall in the library? It's too hard to see.
Oh, very good question. It does look like a picture of a man. Okay, so we don't have a ton of time, so let's just go through it a little bit more quickly.
Wait, just a second. The question, why do you think they're covering all of these places like China and Syria? What is that about?
So China, the only thing I can think of about China is that, which seems very likely, is that what they're talking about is refugees from Shanghai. So China, until, from throughout the 40s up until 1947 or so, I think the Bais Yaakov of Shanghai closed in 1947. So there was a Bais Yaakov in China. And it would make sense that refugee children that came from China to the United States would also be put into a Bais Yaakov in Brooklyn. One of the things that becomes clear from the brochure is that they're raising money. You can see they're on the bottom. And you may have your name or the names of your loved ones perpetuated in the Beth Jacobs Teacher Seminary in the following manner. A scholarship is $365, an inscription on a bronze tablet. You didn't see that in the hipster apartment building, did you? The bronze tablet. And the name inscribed in the golden book, $150. I wonder if that's going to show up on eBay and how much it'll cost. But the way that they're raising money is basically through these refugee children. In other words, the scholarships are the brochure is all about basically young Holocaust refugees and what the services that they're providing for them. And let me show you the next page. One of the things that's so astonishing is how here's a group of refugee students arriving from France on the Polish steamer Sobieski. The record of refugee rescue, thousands more can be saved, but so the way it worked is you had to guarantee the government that you would provide these girls with room, board, clothing, medical care, and other essentials. So in other words, what people were paying for was to sponsor one of these refugee girls. this article, Child Stowaway Flees Ghosts of Auschwitz, is also just an astonishing document. I mean, it's a reprint from the Daily Mirror, 1948, and out of a torture camp into a US classroom. I mean, it'd be interesting to find the original Daily Mirror story, but one of the things that struck me is how differently how different Holocaust discourse was, and how shocking this story is to be in a Bais Yaakov publication. It starts, plump, rosy-cheeked Reisa Grunzweig looks like any other 14-year-old schoolgirl, but then it talks about her experiences in the most horrific way, using words like torture camp, which we don't use anymore, and describing her working in the gas chambers and seeing people thrown into the crematoria alive. And this is, 1948, people talk about how the memory of the Holocaust took a while to develop in the United States. This is a very early description of what the Holocaust was, in really kind of shocking language. And I'll just read the last little bit. Where now you would say, and now Reisa Grunzweig is so happy because she's with a bunch of girls, learning Torah and Bais Yaakov. That's not how it ends. Reisa, it's the last little bit is no smiles now. Reisa doesn't even smile when asked how she likes it here. She doesn't seem to care. I think about the crematorium all the time, and I dream about it at night, she said. It's fine to live here, but I have no parents. I have no one to live for. Living is not worthwhile.
So sad.
Yeah. And if you notice, right to the left of that, help us bring encouragement and happiness to these destitute orphans.
Wow. I'm sure the Bais Yaakov narrative itself was a much more hopeful one than the Daily Mirror, right? This kind of narrative. I mean, I grew up with the contact I had with Holocaust survivors was never this kind of despair openly,
Right.
It was a very non-religious thing, this engaging in despair.
That kind of despair was not really welcome in Bais Yaakov discourse, and Orthodox discourse in general. And look at the image of her. I mean, the images of her in the teacher seminary, which it's interesting because she's 14. She must have been in the high school. And no smile. And there's a smile on the face of a woman behind her. It's only her face that we're interested in.
Yeah.
And then you have a class in session, obviously professionally taken class on the left there.
And a typewriter class.
Taken photo is what I mean, with a man in the back, which is a way to show him. I don't know who that man is, though. From the 1950 yearbook, it looks like it was Gershon Kranzler who was the principal. Is that right, Frieda?
He was. I know he led the yearbooks, right? Gershon Kranzler is a sociologist who wrote about Williamsburg extensively. And he was also extremely invested in the Bais Yaakov movement and getting it sort of off the ground.
We have to find out more about him because he's listed in the yearbook. So, okay, let me just keep going through this. So here's the yearbook, and there's the cover and a certain kind of, like, what can we learn from this? And there you see Gershon Kranzler as the faculty advisor.
Who, this guy is Gershon Kranzler?
It must be him. Did he have a PhD?
Yeah.
So it must be him. So that's interesting. First of all, to have a doctor. And a couple of things I want to point out. To the memory of Dr. Leo Deutschlander, let me just show you Bais Yaakov, the 1977 Bais Yaakov. I have this open.
Okay, I see now. So the picture of the guy is Leo Deutschlander.
This is a much more typical, let's see, this is dedicated to the memory of Sarah Schneer. Sarah Schneer is the one interwar figure who's remembered in Bais Yaakov today, without fail. Leo Deutschlander is very, very rarely remembered, only by, people of particularly scholarly historical bent. So it's interesting to see that in 1950, Sarah Schneer is not mentioned once in this yearbook. And a full page is dedicated to Leo Deutschlander. Who was Deutschlander? Deutschlander was the Vienna-based rabbi doctor, sometimes called Rabbi Shmuel Deutschlander, but here called Rabbi Leo Deutschlander. So they're not afraid of his non-Jewish name. They're not afraid of his doctorate. And they're remembering him as a founder of Bais Yaakov. He dedicated his heart, soul, scholarship, and creative genius to the cause of Bais Yaakov. What they don't actually say is that he dedicated his time to raising money for Bais Yaakov. So the Vienna office was where Bais Yaakov fundraising was centered. He was the director of Keren HaTorah, which was the fundraising branch of the educational arm of the Agudas Yisrael, the Orthodox political organization. And Vienna was the place where you raised money because people in Poland didn't have money. You raised it from people outside of Poland. So it's interesting to know that his memory was carried out up until the 1950s in Williamsburg.
Wow.
I imagine by Vichna Kaplan, who's actually, not mentioned either in this, but who would have known who Leo Deutschlander was. He came to Krakow to visit Sarah Schneer periodically. He went to the summer educational programs, which we know she participated in.
Vichna Kaplan is now described as the founder of the Bais Yaakov in America, and she was a student of Sarah Schneer in Poland.
Right. So it's interesting to see her. I mean, I have to go through the yearbook a little more closely, but the staff that's described here is the staff of the yearbook, not the staff of the school. So why they did that, I don't know. There's a couple of other things I'm still trying to understand. This prayer takes up a whole page. It's sort of like the dedication of the yearbook, and it's by an alumna. So somebody who graduated 2 years earlier. And it's interesting to know why they're publishing a prayer by an alumna, what kinds of relationships there were between the school and its graduates. But I also thought that the prayer was kind of interesting. Give me the power to believe, for the world is a mighty ocean, a magnet that pulls one to destruction, a whirlpool that draws masses into its currents. Help me to stand firm in the hour of my need. Show me the way so that I may follow it. This kind of prayer is, in the interwar period, would have only one thing that it refers to, which is the allure of the secular world. So Bais Yaakov girls would be praying for strength to continue in their path, which first of all begins to show that believing isn't so easy. If you have to, there might be a little hint that she didn't believe if she needed to pray to believe. But given that this is 5 years after the end of World War II, the question of whether the non-Jewish or the secular world is just tempting or murderous, I think is open here, right? The world is a mighty ocean, a magnet that pulls one to destruction. I think destruction here is not just the destruction of the Torah lifestyle, but a whole other dimension of, what the world is after the Holocaust. So that's what I was thinking about this prayer, and I'm wondering if it actually appears elsewhere in some of the literature. This Bais Yaakov yearbook literature tends to be pretty, well, you know what that literature is like. It's written by, Orthodox adolescent girls who are, overflowing with emotion and
very flowery.
Also,
yeah.
Flowery, but also over the top, but also pious because it's Bais Yaakov, but also a little bit maybe rebellious because they're teenagers. So it's an interesting little moment. I mean, no one's going to call this great literature, but what you can say, what you can't say, who says what. There is somebody writing about their mother, the Holocaust survivor. So, you know, this is a school that's, you know, in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust, but before people really figured out how to talk about this, how to talk about the Holocaust, or, you know, what it meant, or how to think about it. So that's one of the things I was looking at. I was also just looking, you know, these are you know, very standard, right? Later,
they're wearing
Bais Yaakov,
hats. Did you wear hats to graduation?
Some. I don't think I remember hats. I remember paper hats in kindergarten.
And they're wearing robes, graduation robes.
They're wearing graduation robes. I didn't even think of that. You didn't have graduation robes?
No.
It's very, and look at their names. I mean, there's Frieda, and that's your name, but there's Adele, Blanche, and Shirley.
And the lipstick. Look at Adele's lipstick.
Adele is wearing lipstick, and look at how she's described.
Censored. Is that what it says?
Yes. And look at Marion Hirschman in the glasses on the left.
Oh, she believes in freedom of speech. She looks like a Supreme Court ambitious candidate.
What the heck was she saying? Dvorah Kalmanovitz, Board of Education.
These are all inside jokes, obviously.
They're inside jokes, obviously, but they're not pious. Some of them are empty and pious, right? Rose Klein, A Perfect Rose. Okay, we get that.
Yeah.
Cheerful, courteous, and capable. But then there's also censored and freedom of speech.
Wow.
On the same page. Is Nellie Lipschitz Nellie Groscott?
Is it? I think so. Does that look like Nellie Groscott? She told me her names. I think she went. Oh God, it must be her.
We have to go and check.
Yeah.
I think I have the class photo of this whole class. I have to go back and look at that too.
Oh, we'll look at it.
And then the missing people.
Sue, right? We don't have a picture for Sue.
No shows. Like, were they sick? Did they not want their photograph taken? A very promising student, always promising to do better. Sue Wexler. And then look at this, Libby Winter, voicetile. A little joke on the Brooklyn accent. You get to hear maybe like a little voice here.
Voicetile, I get it now. Ah, that's good.
Right.
Wherever she doth go. This gives me such a girls' school feel. All the inside jokes, the
right,
puns.
Very old school. But Ruth Moskowitz, like a gas station, always at your service. I don't know how I'd feel if I was Ruth Moskowitz.
I know.
Some people are roses and some people are gas stations. Okay, so you know, the question, this combination of piety and mischievousness, very mild mischievousness, and then the question of how far you know, you can go with the mischievousness, and also what it sort of tells you about, you know, the culture of the school. Tuition, right on time, forgot, but I'll bring it tomorrow. I'll have my father send in a check. There's still 2 days until the end of the month.
Wow.
Tuition is a, you know, that the students know about whether their parents are paying. And this is a very, Bais Yaakov in Poland, same thing, a lot of anxiety about tuition. People mention tuition. The girls know whether their parents are paying. My mother has stories about getting her tuition back right before the war, which saved her life. One of her teachers said, "Here, take this." And she said, "What are you giving me money for?" And she said, "It's your tuition, the refund."
Wow.
And that's how she got on a train and escaped Chernovitz. And then, you know, how diligent they are. Tests, went to sleep 3 o'clock in the morning, studied in the train and bus. The commuter students looked it over before class. It's just thirds and they don't go in our records.
What does that
So
mean?
senioritis, it's just thirds. Maybe a math reference? I don't really know.
Oh,
And then at
wow.
the very bottom, seriously speaking, Bais Yaakov, you're really wonderful. It's a nice place. BY, BY, we love you. So they don't call it Beth Jacob. And what am I
Aha.
going to do without
But this is
you?
already 1955.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. This was the 1955. I forgot to say that we're now in the 1955 yearbook. And something is somewhat confusing to me because in the 1955 yearbook, it says on in the bottom of every page, January 1955. So why they're producing this in January, I don't rightly know.
I think I have a yearbook from the Eastern District High School, which was in Williamsburg, the public school, and it's a mid-year yearbook. They did two yearbooks, a mid-year and an end of year. So the January
Really?
is the mid-year.
Huh.
Yeah. Maybe that's why you got such a good price, because the end of year, the end of year is when they really rip you off.
Right. In all sincerity, do not follow the, and this is called In All Sincerity versus Passing Days, which I think must be a pun. And this is do not follow the ways of the Goyim. I like the translation of Al telchu b'chukot hagoyim, which could be translated the ways of the nation. But here it's just Goyim. And this is again 1955. It's more visually interesting than the 1951. It's longer. It's got these like combinations of drawings and faces, though they seem to have used the faces from the photo. Business managers there, like on the phone across the divide to each other. Literature and pictures. I don't know what else is interesting about this. Typists. Remember that?
Yeah,
Typists.
we
Learned how
saw
to
that
type, Bais Yaakov.
you had typewriting, right?
We had typewriting. That was a really important, right? And didn't Nellie Gruscott have a story about wanting to learn how to type?
Oh yeah. What was the story? Do you
Sorry about
remember?
my phone.
No, my phone is also so.
She wanted to learn how to type, and I think she was like not going to learn in Bais Yaakov. I forget the exact story. Be
Yeah.
interesting to see if that was Nellie Gruscott as one of those typists. And here's the class photo. I think obviously, kind of professional photo job. It looks like it's in the library, and there you can see the man whose face you noticed.
This looks
Who
like
is that
Lincoln or
man? That is
something.
no rabbi.
Yeah. Bow tie.
Again, 1955, he has a bow tie. It's not Abe Lincoln. Okay, we got to get a really good look at it. There seems to be, what can we say about the photo? There seems to be a school uniform, and it seems like maybe not everybody got the message, right? That was always me, like forgetting to dress up, right? And that they
Yeah.
decided to put the girl in the, in the patterned skirt and the one in the whatever that is, the
Sweater.
colorful turtleneck, right in the front, as opposed to hiding them somewhere in the back, which I could see why they made that choice, because the rows of dressed the white shirts, pretty much white shirts, there are a few somewhat exceptions, do have a pleasing visual effect, and the kind of putting them in the way front somehow makes some kind of visual sense. I don't know, any other thoughts about this picture?
Well, first of all, it looks like plenty of ages. Some of the girls look really young and some of them look much older.
This
So
must be the whole school.
the whole school, that makes sense. Do you think they're more slim than a school photo today? They all look like they're really fit, mostly.
The one on the bottom right. Well, yeah, I mean, they're, whatever those people were skinny back then, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm struck by actually the neck thing that everyone seems to be wearing, but not as a school uniform. It seems to be a fashion thing, a
right.
kind of a
Kind
necktie.
of, yeah, some kind of like bow tie or scarf, or one girl has what looks almost like a tie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to, and then what do you think of the hairstyles? Do you think there were rules?
Well, there's one girl with long hair. Otherwise, all the hair is short, isn't it?
Who's the long-haired?
She
Yeah,
looks
way
like
in
she
the
has,
back.
no, the second row in the front. She looks like she has a lot of blonde curls.
Oh, right. Oh my God, yeah, that's a look. Yeah, be interesting to know whether that whether there were any rules about this. One of the things that people always point out on Facebook is that tznius rules were looser back in the day. Though and I do see an elbow or two, but not any knees.
Yeah.
And definitely the cinched waist and the big skirt.
Yeah, the waistline. And the whole tznius was laxer back then. I mean, they had a much more diverse student body.
And apparently you were allowed to wear makeup. It's almost many girls are wearing very dark lipstick.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about those books, whether what we're looking at is a bunch of Sfarim or English books, but we'll figure that part out.
Either way, it's interesting. Is it Sfarim? Is it English books?
Yeah. Well, here's some more photos.
I love it. Life, school, in school.
Something called Lechu's staff. So Lechu, obviously, Bais Yaakov, Lechu v'nelcha, go forth. And
you'll learn.
We have editors, so that's got to be, and this yearbook is called Nigama, so it can't be the yearbook, so it's something else. And the clever art and life in school, right? So the word life as kind of furniture for school. The cafeteria, are they like in the cafeteria eating? Are they working? It looks like some of them might be selling raffle tickets there on the right.
Yeah. Some sales transactions going on, some collection. Maybe they're paying. Maybe they're paying for their food.
They're paying for their food. And there obviously is no school uniform. We see, right, and look at those on the right, patrol squad with the I mean, this is juicy, because this is, right, what is life like in school, obviously posed, but still, what does the cafeteria look like, and where are the grown-ups in any of these photos? They're not here. Basically, what the image that's being projected, whether it's true or not, is of basically student activities being run by schools. Though when it says Helen Braun, chief librarian, oh, there she is in the back. There is a librarian. So that's something. That's library staff, right? There is not just a library, but a librarian, which is really very, for a school that small, I think really impressive, no?
Yeah. Well, I think George Kranzler, from what I've read, was really ambitious in that way. He wanted it to be, is it, you say Torah Mada? Really, right. He wanted it to be the right balance of from and with it. And I can, he was rushing to do the stuff like a yearbook and graduation. But
so it's interesting. We have to find out more about that guy.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so there's a library and a librarian, and she seems to be writing on the blackboard. I'm trying to see what it is she's writing.
I think it says library.
Right, it says library. Make it really clear. And there are all those girls pretending to be taking books out. It's very clearly posed. And then totally mysteriously, maybe you can help me figure out what this is, patrol squad, which underneath it says, Cheese It, the cops. And then Esther Gross is captain. Do you have any theories about what we're looking at?
I mean, were they literally sent into the streets to direct traffic? That's ridiculous.
I think they must have helped people cross the street. It's the only thing I could come up with.
As a mitzvah kind of thing?
Drive carefully. So they must have had some kind of sign in front of the school.
Wow.
But I look at their bobby socks and their, what are those called? Those Mary Jane shoes?
Oh, but those girls aren't wearing tights, are they?
They are not. Neither are the girls in the library picture.
I see, but their skirts are pretty long.
It's true, but that's fashion. That's not tznius.
Yeah. The bobby socks of the 1950s.
The bobby soxers. These are the bobby soxers. I mean, that's one of the things that strikes you is just how American they seem. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about girls from all over the world, refugee girls. They're clearly becoming very Americanized.
Yeah.
Oops, I guess that's the last page that I Xeroxed. There's plenty more. Thank you for getting me to open
Wow.
it up and start looking at it.
I love it. I love it. It reminds me of my school years actually a lot. Does it remind you of Bais Yaakov school?
It does. I mean, the clubs, though the clubs that I remember were dance, and there is a picture of the girls' choir. So choir seems to be, a thing back then. Beaker Cholim was a thing. Did you have Beaker Cholim club?
We didn't have clubs. We
Ah,
just had girls posing for pictures elaborately to make it look natural when it wasn't. And the whole life revolving around that. How much
exactly.
time we
And
put into
much more
pictures.
like that it was much more about the girls, right? So here's the 1977 one. So each girl gets a formal picture and an informal picture.
Wow.
And a whole long description, which I think other people write. Yeah, it's basically a formal pose and a pose with a tree.
That's the informal version. Out in
Because
the
I have
wild.
pictures of my mother in a DP camp. There's a lot of pictures in the Bergen-Belsen DP camp and Fahrenwald DP camp of girls posing with around trees. So there's the school photo, and then there's like somehow the
Nature.
tree photo. That's also something that adolescent girls do, or young women, because my mother was no longer an adolescent. But yeah, the sometimes like three girls around one tree, or it's part of the the dreaminess of. If you notice the Nellie Lifshitz, that really was Nellie Grusgut. It said, "I can dream, can't I?" That was her
Yeah.
motto.
Isn't
It would
that
be very
interesting?
cool to contact her and ask her if she
I
would
have
remember
it. I've done an
why.
interview with her, and
Yeah.
yeah. I asked her for all her last names. She's gone through a number of them, and I'm pretty
Well,
sure.
that's another thing about doing research about girls that we should just acknowledge, which is that you're looking at not only the problem of Orthodox history and the lack of archives around schools, right? What are they? They're a filing cabinet in a basement somewhere, right? And who's going to have access to that? And what are they going to do with it? And what happens when the school goes out of business? There's all that too. But along with all that is the fact that all these girls have different names very shortly.
Yeah.
Like Shoshana Wilbur, if we wanted to know who Shoshana Wilbur is, how likely are we to get anywhere by Googling that name? Like, how many of those girls remained unmarried? Probably a few of them.
Very few. Yeah. I have actually, I got Deborah Feldman, the famous author of Unorthodox, a essay she wrote when she was in Williamsburg, a student in the Bais Yaakov, the Satmar school. She wrote an essay about how Williamsburg keeps her safe. It's a very, the goody essay. Williamsburg keeps her on the right path, almost a self-awareness that she needs the right path. It's interesting. But it's Suri Berkovitz. I got it from her ex-husband. So, I would have never known. I would have never known that Suri Berkovitz, because she went with her second, with her other first name, Deborah, and her married last name, Feldman. So,
right.
It becomes really complicated if you don't, when it comes to this kind of research.
Exactly. And then people changing their names when they go OTD.
Yeah, exactly. Reinventing themselves on top of that. What's really interesting, what strikes me when I was talking to Nellie Grusgut, who went to Bais Yaakov in those early years, she told me that when her mother remarried a Satmar man, she was davening, as she had learned in Bais Yaakov, and her her stepfather yelled at her and said a girl doesn't have to daven. So it's very interesting. And when I looked at my own yearbook, what strikes me is there is no religion whatsoever. Isn't that interesting? Satmar is supposed to be more religious, the girls' school that,
Right.
Satmar is supposed to be on the right of Bais Yaakov, and yet the yearbook is entirely divorced. Like that poem you read about the stormy seas or not following the ways of the Goyim, none of that are in my yearbook. It's
Right.
maybe it's more like friendship is like a seed, a flower with a
Exactly.
petal.
It's so interesting. Like religion for girls is spasnished, you know? It's like girls shouldn't, it's not their business. Their business is to, they do their thing, they're given this little moment to just be girls, and then they're mothers, and then they do what their mothers did. They don't have
Exactly.
intimate religious relationships with the religion. They're not, that's the innovation of Bais Yaakov, to make girls religious. Chomi Juni, who writes about the art scroll Siddur and the women's Siddur. So the women's Siddur is, she calls it queer, because they're constantly giving women these double messages. You don't have to do this, but if you're going to do this, this is how you do this. And do this voluntarily, but you're supposed to do it voluntarily. Like the complicated way in which Jewish law that's written for men, when it gets transferred to women, produces all these weird double messages and etc. Oh, I can't believe I somehow didn't, I thought I Xeroxed a couple of other things. So one of the things, which I must have not scanned it or put it in the PDF, but this 1950 Hamigama or Hamigama has, oh no, I'm sorry, the 1951 also has a Hebrew section. So there are these Hebrew poems, including this poem, Lebeit Sefreinu, so to our school, a Hebrew poem written by a girl to our school. And then Hamasayimot, the graduates, or Hamasayimos.
Wow.
And each one gets a little pasuk, a little verse from the sacred sources that describes her. And about half of them come from, as you can imagine, Aisha Schuyl. So, Yakrahimi Pnimnim, she's finer than, right, this is, she's more precious than Pnimnim. B'mase Yadecha Aranein, she plays beautiful music, but
Where does it come from? Like Shirim or something? Was it?
It comes from somewhere in Tehillim.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of them are actually Shir HaShirim, a lot of different places, but then every once in a while they just, I guess they ran out of possibilities, and they had to, like, here's Hadassah Breyer. You can see the second thing. So
Yeah.
Hadassah Breyer, it says, Ish Yodea Minagen Bekinor, from the book of Samuel, which means a man who knows how to play the lyre, harp, whatever a kinor is. But because she's a woman, they had to change it to Isha Yodaas Minagen Kinor. So they had to add the hey. Here, let me show you.
Did they did it in parentheses?
In parentheses.
Wow.
So basically, I think that's what Chomi Juni in her dissertation, which is going to be a book, is talking about, when she says that the transfer of religious content, or the transformation of religious content for the purposes of describing a woman, is something that the tradition isn't very good at. And once you've gone through the couple of places where women are mentioned, you have to start transgendering all kinds of things. So if you have a woman who plays the kinar, like David did, right? I'm sure this describes David, right? David played the harp, King David, David HaMelech. So you got to put in some, like, hey, and the same thing down there. And here they changed to Ve'anuyim anavim yirshu eretz v'yitnagu al Rosh Shalom. It doesn't even give it. They have a whole bunch of parentheses. That one they have to change a bunch of times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
And then they have one Ke'erez Balvanon Yishke, like a tall cedar tree, or Yishke.
This is very different, though, from the way the Reform movement takes the tefillas, the prayers, and adds women in, you know, Sarah and whatever. This is a very different concept. This is they're not quite doing that. They're not trying to actually overtly be inclusive. They're just trying to make more space for women.
Right. It's not a feminist move. It's a kind of complicated tension within the system that gets expressed through this he, she, they, them pronoun thing.
Yeah.
And the tension is, you know, we're Jewish, traditional Jewish girls, and since we're traditional Jewish girls, we look to the sources, the biblical sources, the rabbinic sources, to describe ourselves. And yet the sources that we look at tend to be describing men. So we're doing this weird, queer, cross-gendered thing, but we're doing it in the service of connecting deeply to a tradition that only fits us awkwardly. So I think that's how you would sort of understand the multiplication of gender, you know, transgendering in the Hebrew part of the book.
Yeah, I guess I need to let you go. I want to ask you one last question. How do you read this women partaking in this male religiosity? Do you read it as, I guess I wrestle with, is this a piety? Is this a feminism? Is this a conservatism? You know, is Bais Yaakov more conservative?
It pushes us to basically, you know, rethink those categories that have become so stereotypical. And so, right, so a feminist is, you know, is subversive and rebellious. And what does it mean to be a feminist in the service of piety, or you know, or how do we think about that combination? And how do we think about things like, you know, what is the femininity that's expressed in this? There's actually very little femininity in some way, because that's what people say about same-sex education, is that girls in co-ed schools are taught to be feminine because they have to be different from the boys who are looking at them, and they have to be, whereas girls who are in an all-female setting are sort of released from the demands of femininity. Do you think that's true?
It's very interesting. I do. I will say that I have gone back and thought back to my years in a girls only school and how much I was not self-aware of myself as a sexualized person, of the male gaze, and how much that shapes a different childhood, a completely different it's not just that I didn't experience the male gaze. It took me years to even understand that exists and that changes you, you know,
right.
And I do think back to how it changes you.
There's something really great about it. It was like I didn't have a gender.
Yeah,
I wasn't a girl because everybody was a girl. It's like you're not a human being when everybody's a human being. You're just you.
Yeah.
And being a girl sort of sucks. I don't know. I don't, you know, identify or woman or and it's something that is placed on you in once sexual segregation goes away. It's like one of the things that sexual segregation gives you is kind of a release from gender.
Yeah. Took me years to even begin to grasp why people would be nuns. And of course it is that space where you don't have to deal with that gender, you know, dynamic that
you didn't want to be a nun.
I don't think so. Maybe not for me, but I've come to understand that a lot of nuns are big personalities that kind of have found a place.
I had a lot of friends who were nuns when I taught at the GTU. There's a movie that I think Cher is in it, and Winona Ryder, where there's I think it starts with a little girl like on her knees in front of an altar, and she's got her hands together like this, and she's praying ecstatically, and her mother comes in and she goes something like, "Charlotte, we're Jewish."
That's a whole other level of wanting to be a nun.
Right.
That's terrific. Oh, thank you so much for
This was
sharing.
so much fun. Let's do it again.
Yes. Oh, I would love to. There are so many other things we can look at. It's going to be fun.
Thank you.
We'll do it again. I'll hold you to it.
See ya.